Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Dog Speak Live. Today we have Laura Miles, and if you are not aware of who Laura is, after this, listening to this, please get to know this lady. She's got a bag of knowledge and fantastic experience. So, if you're a dog trainer, whether you're a newbie or someone that's been in the profession for quite a while, and you just need that little bit extra, I say Laura is your lady. Laura combines her qualifications in canine and human learning theory to help dogs, their owners, aspiring and newly qualified dog trainers to thrive. Laura has been running her own dog training business in South Petherton, Somerset, for the past 7 years. Before this, Laura spent 20 years as a social worker and 11 years as a social work practice teacher. Laura has studied with Sarah Whitehead, Absolute Dogs, and the School of Canine Science, just to name a few. She is also an approved dog trainer with the Dog Training College, where Laura has spent the last 2 years as a senior trainer and student mentor. In this role, Laura supports students in applying theory to practice and provides train the trainer support for adult learners enrolled in the Dog Trainer Certification Program. Additionally, Laura holds a postgrad in adult learning theory and a master's level, which enhances her understanding of the human side of training, allowing her to create the best learning experiences for both dogs and their owners. Laura has a special passion for one-to-one dog training, focusing on helping owners gain a better understanding for their dog and uncovering what motivates each individual to enhance learning, strengthen their bond, and help them thrive. Laura, welcome to Dog Speak. How are you?
Hello, hi Colin. Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm really well, thank you. And you?
Not too bad. It's been one of those days. Started off doing bits and pieces before I left out, and I've been in and out, in and out, in and out, and then booking people in the last hour or so. So yeah, it's been one of those days. Today's topic, we're actually going to be talking about rewards. And a lot of people, I believe, get confused between, they're not quite sure what is reinforcement, what is a reward, what is food, what is a treat. Because they're all different descriptions that confuse people. So why should we think? Why should we be thinking about rewards?
I guess for me that, and I love that you just said, the differences between a reward, a treat, reinforcement. Because for me in dog training, a reward should be reinforcing the behavior. That's how we know. So, when I'm working with clients, that's what I'm always talking about. What change did that have on the behavior? Because if the response isn't increasing or being maintained, then that would identify that that's not really a very rewarding experience for the dog. And that's the difference. I get a lot of clients that come to me with dogs that maybe they've struggled to motivate, that they're very distracted by the environment, for example. And they may even come to me and go, oh, my dog isn't food motivated, or my dog doesn't work for treats. And soon we find out actually that they do.
And that probably was because they found the right reward,
Yeah,
yeah?
yeah,
Which now I suppose we can call the right reinforcer.
absolutely. Absolutely. So, you know, I mean, obviously, as a reward-based trainer, one of the most obvious rewards is food. But that's not to say that that's what we're limited by or to, and not at all. Um, so I might have a starting point of thinking about what food does your dog prefer, and we might start with a food preference test. Using the muffin tin, for example, using a cake tin, putting different types of rewards in there and seeing which one the dog chooses first. It's not overly scientific. It might just give us an indication of something they might prefer. They may even be choosing the one nearest to them. So it's not hard and fast. But um, I think that gives us a starting point, because what I see is a lot of owners make the mistake of thinking kibble is a reward. And don't get me wrong, some dogs find that rewarding. I've got one owner, for example, who feeds raw, and if she brings a bit of kibble out for her dogs, they're like, "Woohoo, kibble! This is different. It's not my raw diet. It's like a bit like having crisps." So for her dogs, actually, that can be a training reward. Um, I guess the danger that we can fall into is just because the dog is eating it, it doesn't mean it was a rewarding experience. And an example of that, Colin, would be, I don't know about you, but I love the Quality Street at Christmas. And I know which ones are my favorites. I love the green triangle and the big
Mhm.
purple. Really can't stand the strawberry creams and orange creams. But in January, I forced those in,
Mhm.
um, and I'm eating them. And if you saw me in January, you might think Laura really loves those strawberry and orange creams. I don't. I really actually dislike them. But when it's desperate times, I will eat them. So you might go, oh, I'm going to train Laura with the orange cream and not get very far.
Which does make sense, and it also comes back to that dogs have emotions, so therefore they're going to have preferences to like or
Absolutely.
dislike. So food, which was, most people going to be watching this, will relate to it in the sense that as soon as dogs know that there is something edible about,
Yeah,
they're there. Yeah,
yeah,
it's part of their survival mechanism.
yeah,
But when we're looking at rewards, just because we're giving the dog the food doesn't necessarily it's a part of the training experience for the dog.
yeah,
Yeah, they may not be making any associations apart from you're giving them the food.
yeah,
And like you also said, it may not be rewarding enough
yeah.
for that task. So when we look at rewards, reinforcers, what one of those two words are you looking to use with new people so they understand what a reward actually is
Yeah,
and when it becomes the
yeah,
reinforcer?
yeah. I guess I'm using both. We are using a reward because I don't want, the other key point is that a reward is not necessarily something that says reward or treat on a packet. It doesn't necessarily come out of my treat pouch, and hopefully I'm going to get onto that this evening. A reward is whatever the learner finds rewarding. And that might be food, but equally it might not be. And we've got to think about the baseline of whether your dog is fit and well and able to take food, if we're going to use food, and if they're not, we want to so I'm working on the assumptions that we've kind of looked at that, and we've looked at maybe reasons dogs wouldn't take food, for example. But when I'm working with clients, I'm trying my early sessions with them are really trying to get that bit right, because that's really important, and educating them in terms of when they're by using those words reward and reinforcement, it helps us analyze the behavior. Is your reward reinforcing the behavior? I've got a really great example of that. A little dog I was working with, Ruby, a great little spaniel. And we did a reward preference test. And mum discovered that the dog absolutely adored warm chicken. So we were working, yeah, well, who wouldn't? We were, I'd go running across the field for warm chicken. But so knowing that, she came to me with struggles with recall, with the dog suddenly running off and shooting off into a hedge, and the recall had got really, I guess, damaged the recall cue. So we were trying to enhance that and add some meaning to that. So we started with the reward preference test and discovered that the dog loved warm chicken. So we were doing an exercise where we were throwing a lower value treat out to get the dog away. so that then we could start connecting the recall cue. As soon as the dog's eaten that treat, we're going to add the recall cue and create a rewarding experience, is the way I like to phrase it, rather than just giving the dog a reward. We are going to create a rewarding experience for bouncing back in. And what we noticed, because we're thinking about rewards and reinforcement, was the owner was throwing out a lower value biscuit and the dog was sprinting after it. And then she was whistling for the dog for her warm chicken, and the dog was wandering back. Now, that helped us see that although she was using warm chicken, which in a preference test trumped the dry biscuit, in this instance it didn't. So what was the difference? And the difference we figured out for this dog was the movement. It was the throwing of the biscuit. So even though biscuit isn't as good as chicken, flying biscuit is pretty epic. So the dog was flying out after this biscuit and picking it up and wandering back for warm chicken. So we started with our recall cue, then throwing the chicken, animating it, flying chicken, because that's what the dog was motivated by. And that helped us really boost that dog's recall response by watching the behavior and looking at what was being reinforced. So that, so there's a good example of rewards and reinforcement.
So that's a very good example, actually, because I'll say a lot of people don't really think about it in that way and observing and analysing the dog. If we throw a piece of food out, they're not analysing how the dog is attempting moving towards the food, how the dog picks it up, how the dog's eating it, how the dog comes back. Whereas, what you're saying is you notice that the dog's gone out for the kibble really, really super fast. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because of the movement of it,
Yeah.
the chase,
Yeah.
the capture. Yeah. So that was rewarding in itself, just seeing it flying through the air and landing.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
But
Chasing it, then sniffing for it off the ground, all of those things made that elevated it. So, when I'm talking to clients, I often try to talk about a kind of seesaw effect, how we could have something, I'm not a big fan of using lower value, if we look at our reward preference, lower value rewards, but we can elevate, like a seesaw, the value of that reward by what we do with it. And it's not just about throwing rewards around, randomly, just chucking them into the air. It's really watching the behavior. Is it placing the reward on the ground, or breaking the reward up for the dog to sniff? Is it chasing a bold piece of food? Is it getting something that's flicked? My boy loves something that's flicked. That really gets him moving. Um, is it being thrown into the air? Are you watching it coming down? Is it going from hand to hand so you can watch the movement? If you're particularly, maybe if you're a herding type breed, you might like to eye stalk that and watch it move. And so what we see is when we take time to consider that, and the impact that has on the behavior we're trying to grow, then we can start to understand what really motivates that dog.
that's interesting. It will be more interesting for someone who is new to owning a dog or a
Yeah,
trainer who's very new to, the industry, that the rewards, the food, the treat, whatever they're going to call it, yeah,
yeah,
has to be right. Has to be the right reward, the right reinforcer who needs that motivation. Yeah.
absolutely.
So how do we know when we're teaching a specific behavior for a purpose, not for a good functional purpose? How do we know that it's strengthening, that reward is really reinforced? How do we know this?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, recall's a really easy one because our recall, we can see it getting faster. For example, I see a lot of dogs where I'm training on the field and they're coming in a trot, do 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 do, coming at their own time. And when we get the the saliency, and I'm going to get onto that bit in a minute, when we get the saliency of the reward right, now they're countering. And I often kind of joke with my clients and talk about, growing up, my nanny always gave me a pound coin sellotape to a birthday card. Always. And the fact that I'm now in my 50s and I'm still banging on about it tells you what a powerful experience that was, by being disappointing. She's no longer with us, so she won't be offended by me talking about this. She thought it was a reward. She's giving me a pound. That's a reward from her perspective. But year on year, that pound started to lose its value, obviously in line with inflation. Yeah, exactly. And by the time I was 18, I got my 18th birthday card, and I was doing the kind of, waiting to see the notes flutter out, and it was still a pound coin sellotaped to the card. Now, my nan thinks she's given me a reward. She has given me a reward. She's given me a pound. And from my nan, that was kind and that was lovely, and I'm grateful. But it wasn't a very rewarding, salient experience. Now, what we know in training, Skinner tells us the saliency of the reward is really important. The saliency, the meaningfulness, how noticeable it is. That makes a difference. And what he found was, if something is very salient, when he was experimenting with these rats in the lab, and, let's not get into the ethics about that. But what he noticed was, if it was very salient, then noticeable, meaningful, important to that rat, he could form an association in one repetition. Whereas if it was kind of like my nan's pound coin, mediocre, it might take between 50 and 200 reps. So for me, when I'm working with clients, that's kind of lessons number 1, 2, and 3, really. Let's really figure out what your dog is motivated by and how we can incorporate that into our training. Because then we've got our communication then. We've got a dog who wants to work with us because we've thought about what motivates them. And for me, that would be my tip for any owner or any trainer, is to really, don't rush on and just assume, just because it's in your treat pouch or it says treat on the bag, that it is one to the learner. That's the bit that makes the difference, I would say.
Everything you just said makes perfect sense. So, in other words, what you didn't say, but you're sort of saying, is before we just look at the training needs, just training the dog or
Yeah,
working with the dog, let's look at what's going to help motivate the
yeah,
dog, an incentive. So, using the right incentives is another way of looking at the rewards. Yeah, the right
absolutely.
incentives to motivate.
Yeah,
Because people do struggle though. Yeah,
yeah.
um, rewards are not cheap.
No, no, they're not cheap, but they could be. If we really think about, so, movement is free. One of my favorite rewards that I do with clients is using, and I know with yourself, for me, the core foundation of my work with clients and dogs is relationship. So yes, we're talking about rewards, but I'm talking to you about it on the assumption that we have looked at everything else that sits beneath before we're training, the health of the dog, the relationship, and so on. When I say about motivation and I want a dog who wants to work with me, I also want a dog who wants to be with me because we've got a great relationship, or I've helped that owner develop that great relationship. That is the core foundation for me. It's harder to recall a dog away from a distraction if you don't have a great relationship or you haven't practiced that. I want a dog who wants to hang around here, who wants to be with me, and I'm the fun police calling them away from fun over there back to being with me. They kind of want to be with me anyway. Oh, Laura's calling. Epic, brilliant. So it's really important to kind of get those things right in the beginning. And as you say, looking before we even start training, And we can do some of this during training. And as well, it's about being open to change.
Mhm.
Oh, okay, we've got to week 3. That's kind of not working. And being open to that. And because we're assessing as we go. If we stick with our assessment on day 1 and we don't change it, then we're not going, well, actually, that was working, but it's not now. What's changed? Um, I guess my biggest teacher in terms of thinking about rewards and reviewing what a reward is and what it's reinforcing was my own dog Milo.
Right.
He has been one of the hardest dogs to work with.
Right.
Um, he is a Shih Tzu cross. Everyone told me he was stubborn because he's a Shih Tzu. I don't hold with that. I don't like labels. He's not stubborn because he's a Shih Tzu. He had trauma. He had pain. He had stomach issues. He had fear of food, etc., etc. So I had to be really creative about how I worked with him, and it really made me take another look at what a reward is. Um, and looking beyond the treat pouch, if you like. I use treats because they allow us to get a lot of reps in. They're handy, they're convenient, and most dogs will work for them. But if you have a dog who won't, how are you then going to work with them and use a reward? Um, One of our favorite rewards ended up being with him was the Amazon delivery. He just loves shredding, digging and shredding and ripping apart a box and the paper inside. So, that was our kind of entry level, getting something that would reinforce some training. So I would whistle for him. I would save the boxes and I would whistle for him, and then I would put the boxes down and shredding time can now commence. So that whistle means come running and we'll do shredding and ripping up paper. That's not a treat, but it's a reward to him.
You stole my thunder there, that last bit, because
Oh, sorry.
as you're talking, it's very important for others to realize that it's not all about food. A dog finding something very rewarding
Yeah,
is equally as good as food. So having a dog that has good relationship, has a good bond, you are always an incentive, and your dog always wants to come back.
yeah,
That's rewarding in itself.
yeah, yeah,
You know, and
absolutely. Yeah,
a lot of people struggle to get that bond.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So let's just say we got food, we got chicken. Okay, we got chicken, we got lamb, we got beef, or we got kibble, whatever that may be. And let's just say I'm on the phone to you, Laura. I need help. I've got this puppy, got this dog on rescue, and I've even given it venison and cut up lumps of steak, and it's not interested. Yeah,
yeah.
which doesn't sound like most dogs. What a point. Would you say dogs are equally able to like a toy, find that rewarding? We teach dogs by, certain behaviors by using toys.
Absolutely. I love toys. So and that's interesting. That's one of the so please bring me back on point if I drift off. But one of my ways of helping Milo, ensuring I dealt with his medical needs and I had him on the right diet, etc., etc. But one of the ways I got him to work with food was with toys because um he loved the Tug Enough clam, for example. So, there are other ones available, but I love the Tug Enough toys. And
So do I.
so if people aren't familiar with the clam, it's a sphere, it's a ball, but it's kind of in 2 sections and it velcros together. So I made a little game because he loves digging and hunting and something being flicked. I would put a piece of food inside the clam and he would dig it out and rip it open and then he would eat it. and I cannot emphasize how much we struggled in the early days to get him to eat anything. He was very fearful about food. Um, and he was fearful about hands. He is a puppy farm puppy, so he was fearful about food in hands and hands approaching him. So we could use this toy to, one, help build positive associations with food, build positive associations with me, because it was a team sport. Sometimes he'd need help with me to open it. And so we would do that dissecting and hunting together. And then he loves things to be flicked. So then I would get the clam and flick it. Now he's chasing it and opening it and eating the food. And so the role of toys here, not only did I have a way of training him just by using a toy, but actually this toy helped me try out different foods with him and start to desensitize his kind of worries around food in a pressure-free way, because he could open it himself, and if he didn't want to eat it, he didn't eat it. So that for me is one bit about toys. The other element I love about toys, and I try to have a big selection of toys on my training field for dogs to choose their own preference. I might wave them about a bit. I don't, a tip would be not to wave a toy in the dog's face. It's to actually move the toy away from the dog and see if they're interested. So I might kind of do a little bit of animation and demoing the toys almost to the dogs, and then put them down and let them choose which one they like. The downside of toys is that you may not be able to get as many repetitions in as you might with food. Let's say we were trying to train something over a minute. You can probably get many more reps in doing an exercise with food than you can with toys, because you've got to factor in the playing. Because if you're not going to play, then the toy loses its value. But if we go back to our saliency, you may be counteracting that because that's way more salient for that dog.
It's interesting because choices. I often see people just take out a toy, and this is
Yeah,
the one you're going to work with.
yeah,
If you give the dog the option to make a decision as to between two or three different toys, it's really fantastic to watch a dog go and sniff them all, and then they gravitate and tell you that's the one I want.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it can be based on texture. Is it fluffy? Is it small? Does it fit in my mouth nicely? Is the color? Does the movement appeal to me? Is it the smell? What is it? I mean, growing up, I had a room full of Barbies and dollies, and I wanted to play with my brother's Action Man, you know, probably because he didn't want me to. But we all make choices. So I think it can be really empowering as well, particularly if you're working with a dog who maybe has a history of trauma, allowing them to choose and thinking about the way they play as well. I mean, that's another subject for another day, but thinking about which element of the play that do they enjoy? Do they want to hold it? Not all dogs want it in their mouth.
Mhm.
Some just want to chase it. Some want to,
Yes.
yeah, some are interested in the movement. Some don't want to hold it. Some love to tug. Some would rather not, etc., etc. So really thinking about that as well. Going back to your individual. What is it that that dog enjoys? And again, going back to our rewards can be food, rewards can be toys, rewards can be the dog's own natural behaviors. The rewards can be gathered from the environment. So, and an example of that is I have been working with an owner who has a Jack Russell who is nearly 8 years old and has had struggles with dog interactions the whole 8 years. And in our time working together, we've worked through my program, but we got to about week 5 and we'd got to the point where we'd found the solution for this dog, and we're then meeting up and doing group walks with other dogs. Very carefully managed exposure, of course, working through our plan. The secret weapon for that dog, if you like, was digging.
Right.
We got digging on cue. We taught the dog to dig on cue, because working with the owner and trying to find out, so, if your dog ruled the world, what would your dog like to spend their day doing? Digging. And I've got some molehills in the corner of my training field. So we went and did some digging. And pure joy, nothing like watching a Jack Russell. And he would literally run across the field, look at his mum, can I? And pounce into the molehill. And I hope no moles were harmed in this, but boing in it, having the best time. So what we started to do is we taught him to dig on cue, step one. And then we started to bring in our trigger, which for him was other dogs. At a safe distance, obviously, thinking about we weren't flooding, we were working out in our kind of green ring of safety at a lovely distance away from our trigger. And when the dog noticed, not necessarily saw, noticed, heard, smelt, saw, whatever it was, the trigger, we marked it, and we then cued the dog to dig. That was the difference. So now, instead of dogs leading to him barking, lunging, now dogs are good, because now I get to dig. So now we've been able to now work with that dog in a group of 4 other dogs, what parallel walking opposite each other. And if we feel he's kind of stacking up, we can go and have a little bit of digging time. But he's a transformed dog, because we really thought about what he values.
Which is so important.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
Rewards, reinforcement, and going the extra mile to just find out what really turns this dog on, and
Yeah.
can we set the scene up so that if they're struggling, digging becomes rewarding.
Yeah. And giving relief, so we use that like we might if we're working with our treats. So at the beginning of the session, if we can see he's struggling, we might use it as an opportunity to help him decompress or just chill out, kind of emotionally transition into the environment. It's okay, let's do a little bit of sniffing and digging along the side of the verge. Okay, we're good to go now. Let's come back into the session. Let's give him a little bit of relief, do some digging. And so it's really helped his emotional regulation, and providing some relief. And at no point has he not being able to dig, but there have been points during the training where he was unable to take treats. So he was unable to take food, but he can dig, because that kind of trumps everything. So really tailoring that, and that I genuinely believe that's been the big difference with that dog.
So, we've touched on food, we've touched on toys.
Yeah.
Would an environment be rewarding? Could we use that as reinforcement?
Mm. Absolutely. Absolutely. So I guess there, we're thinking about sniffing. If you've got a dog who loves to sniff, I get that a lot. Or I'm really struggling with my loose lead walking. My dog's permanently sniffing. Again, a bit like the digging. Okay, well, let's get that on cue and let's use it as the reward. Let's do that together. And if we go back to our foundation of our work together, let's not be the person depriving you of the sniffing. Let's do more sniffing
Nice.
together. So I might be going, hey, it's a really great sniffing spot over here. Come over here, like I would do with Milo. That, hey, mate, there's a molehill over here. Toot, come and find this molehill. So I'm not, I think we are very hung up on, I want my dog to behave in a particular way and forget that they're a dog.
Yeah.
and forget whose walk is it, for example. When I go out on a walk with Milo, I try to remember that it's his walk. And he may have been really patient and waited for me to finish teaching and so on. And when he goes out, he wants to sniff. If it's becoming a problem where the dog is just pulling you through the environment to constantly sniff, let's start to use that. Just do a quick, can you look at me? Then you can go and sniff. Start small so that it's not too difficult, like we would with any training. Do you want to? I had another dog who was obsessed. He struggled with dog-dog interaction struggles, and he was obsessed with water. So we found a training field with a pond, and we taught him to engage with the owner and disengage from the water
Yes.
as part of his training program, because it built up his ability to engage with the owner and disengage from triggers. We used the water first. We taught him the preferred responses that we would want him to do in the presence of triggers. We taught him that with the water. And whenever he did it, he was allowed to go and interact with the water. That approach can take longer at the beginning. It can take longer at the beginning, but actually, I would say they level out, because probably we're going back to our saliency again. So absolutely thinking about what it is in the environment. Often the thing in the environment, your nemesis, what I would say to people, what's your nemesis? Because that's often the answer. Is it chasing? Okay, let's incorporate chase into our training plan. How can we mimic that maybe with toys or food or ourselves, us running, if that's appropriate for the owner? The flicking is chase. So absolutely thinking about, when we think about Rafi, the little Jack Russell, that digging, that's using the environment. Sniffing is so calming and soothing and boosts confidence. It's relationship enhancing. So you're doing that together. How rewarding is that? That you're going, okay, because it can get very transactional. You do this and I'll give you that. And so we've got to bear that in mind as well, I think.
It's interesting the sniffing scenario because that's how dogs see the world. Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah.
they see the world through their nose.
Yeah.
So if we're out on a walk, it's always a good idea, like you say, to give them the opportunity to explore at their own leisure, wherever
Yeah.
they want to do, so long as it's appropriate and safe.
Yeah.
So, so we've managed to get through the environment and understanding that the environment can also be rewarding. Yeah,
Yeah.
the environment being rewarding, we got the food reinforcer, we got the toy reinforcer,
Yeah.
and now we got the three things that we can combine. That must be an owner and a trainer in their element in a place where they got food, toys, and the environment.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
How do you? I mean, I remember when I first started out, I used to struggle to know which one to use, which was the
Yeah.
best one. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Have you got any suggestions for anyone listening,
Yeah.
watching? Um, do they use all three, or do they use it like the food, the cake tin? Can we see which one the dog prefers most,
Yeah. Yeah.
and which one they find the most rewarding? What would you suggest?
Yeah, so that's a brilliant point. So, again, I often kind of say, if your dog had could write, how would they score it? How would they write their own reward preference hierarchy? Is it biscuit, chicken, cheese, moving cheese, sniffing out cheese in a toy, chase? What is it? What is it that the dog prefers? And, as you and I know as trainers, it often, I would say, at the beginning of training, and if you're going to be learning something new, or you're going to be learning something difficult, or you're up in the distractions, you need to be using your higher value. You only bring your value down when the skills are starting to become established. Carefully, though, I would always argue carefully.
Yeah.
Don't bring it down too quickly, or don't get rid of it too quickly, because then you're gonna see a decrease in the response. So we need to be thinking about that carefully. Um, we also, and it's a great point to bring up, because if I can think about some of the dogs I work with, there's one I'm working with at the moment, a Belgian Shepherd. Now, with that dog will work for food, their high value food, really nicely, brilliantly. But that's not the thing. I'm
Right.
working for it, I'm training, it's all lovely. Now, the challenge that owner's got is that suddenly, if off lead, this dog will suddenly bolt, be distracted by something, and be gone.
Right.
So that's her nemesis. So we've been incorporating that into our training. What does that dog absolutely love on a training field? A flirt pole. So like a horse lunging whip for people that don't know, with a fluffy toy on the end, because it kind of can activate that chasing, herding, driving, eye stalking behavior. But obviously, if we want to get that in as a surprise, a flirt pole is not exactly subtle. So then we have a tug toy, a long handled tug toy in the owner's in the back of their jacket, big pocket, and we bring it out. So what the kind of secret weapon with that dog is to really think about, if we brought the toy out at the beginning, it's hard to come back down from that,
Right.
because now the dog's going toy, 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 toy. Where's the toy? And no, I don't want these treats. I want the toy now. I've seen the toy. So we bring that out when the dog's not expecting, towards the end of the session. Whereas another dog, we might bring out the highest value at the beginning to get the dog interested and engaged, but that dog then might be able to then move on to other reward values. And sometimes we see that with dogs who don't take food. You might have a dog who won't take food at the beginning of the session. You use toys to settle them in and help them settle into the environment. And then you find they will take the food. And that gives you a little bit of a measure of where they're at emotionally. Oh, they will take the food now. But with the Belgian Shepherd, I would keep the toys for when we want to do what I call kapow moments. So when I'm thinking about my rewards and my reinforcement, I really love to throw in a kapow moment. I wait for the dog to think they know what you're doing. You're so predictable, Laura. This is what you're going to do, or their owner. And they're suddenly mooching around the field, thinking they know it. And then we'll throw in a kapow moment, which is usually sprinting off with a toy trailing, looking like having the best party ever. And then the dog's like, wow, amazing. And obviously that's very salient. And for her, with her struggle of her dog suddenly doing that in the environment, she's become that. The dog is now watching her. I better watch mum. She might sprint off in a minute. A little caveat with that, not doing that with a dog that maybe had separation attachment issues, because we don't want to create fear and tension around that. This dog hasn't got that. This dog is just suddenly, oh, over there looks like more fun, and suddenly shoots off. So we can incorporate that into our training.
So, okay, so rewards, reinforcement, outdoor activities, etc., which
Yeah,
dogs can also find rewarding. What about, let's just say we got a dog who's post-op. Um, what? Let's just okay. The dog is post-op, and but they are able to think clearly. They can still enjoy a reward.
yeah,
What would you do with a dog that's crate bound? Not necessarily crate bound, but we can't
yeah.
take the dog out. They can't go for a run. They can't go for a walk. They can move around the house.
Yeah.
Would you be doing similar things?
Oh, I love that you asked that. I absolutely love that you asked me that. That's one of my favorite things to suggest to clients. So obviously we need to, we can't be training a dog who's post-op, depending where they're at. I'm assuming, you said they're still on limited exercise and in their crate, etc. For me, then we're just thinking about enrichment. We're thinking about providing outlets. So, of course, we've got all of our usual stuffed Kongs and licky mats, and I would, if appropriate, depending on the dog's needs, I'd be thinking about destruction boxes and stuffing the inside of toilet rolls and kitchen rolls and all of that. What I also love to recommend is that if the dog's unable to go out, is that the owner goes out into the environment. And I also recommend this approach for dogs who are nervous around their own environment, their immediate environment, is to go out and gather things. So I suggest owners go and pick up feathers and bits of wood and leaves and twigs and whatever, obviously dog safe things, nothing that's going to be toxic, a stone off of a corner, and bring it home, a little sniff box, because the dogs do see the world through their noses. And it would be a bit like if I'm stuck at home and you're going to bring something for me to look at and take interest in. So, that would be one of my little top tips, is to obviously think about all those standard enrichment things that you can give to the dog. Scatter feeding, if appropriate, if they're able to go out and do that, but bring the environment in for them to sniff and explore.
As we're talking, I think we covered quite a bit about rewards. The last bit we just spoke about is quite interesting in many ways because we're not training dog post-op, but we're providing things that reinforces good mental health.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah? So, anyone that's watching, a reward can be many, many things, so long as it's appropriate, it's safe,
Yeah.
yeah, and the dog's going to get pleasure from that activity or object, then everything Laura has said here today has been absolutely brilliant. Laura, if people want to contact you, how would they find you?
You can find me at Dog Training with Laura Mars. If you just Google me, you will find my website. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook. So yeah, please come and check me out and give me a follow. That would be lovely. Thank you, Colin.
Laura, it's been an absolute pleasure having you come along and talking about rewards. I picked up a few tips as well. That's why I love podcasts and speaking to many people because oh, that's handy. I wouldn't have stolen that.
Brilliant. Yeah, stealing that one.
Got to have you to come. Definitely got to have you to come back. So until the next time, it's goodbye from myself and goodbye from Laura, and we meet again.